makers. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about the maintenance of a 3D printer, which you should do periodically at the start of every print, and also some of the better upgrades that you can do. Some are relatively cheap and inexpensive, others cost a lot more, and you know, the way you should go about it. So let's start with some of the upgrades I've done to my printer. I've actually got two printers. The Cocoon Create Touch is the first one that I got. The first upgrade that I would recommend for anyone is actually these little knobs. Let me just try and get in closer to those so you can see it. Okay, so these little knobs are for leveling the bed, and I found these on Thingiverse. I'll put a link in the description to them. They've actually got number divisions on them, each division representing 0.1 of a millimeter for height level adjustment. This is very handy so you know how much you're leveling the bed or adjusting it up or down. It's a very cheap upgrade to do. They use nylock nuts on the bottom, and it's one I can't say enough about. One of the other upgrades I would suggest is actually having a box for spare parts. The first spare part I would strongly suggest you get and put in the box and leave it as a spare for when you need it are the fans. Remember, the Cocoon Create Touch is a 24 volt system, so therefore you need 24 volt fans. 12 volt ones will just burn out on you. Fans like this one and the one inside the bottom for the electronics run the whole time the printer is powered, and they will fail. Unfortunately, when the one here fails, it will result in blobs forming. You'll get heat creep up into the PTFE tube, and it's going to cause it to jam up on you. Every time I see people on the forums talking about blobs jamming near the top, it's always inevitably the fan that's at fault. So carry that as a spare. On this particular model printer, I would also carry a thermistor for the bed. I've had it break it at this point at the back here, set 3 or 4 times. I've repaired it a couple of times, but I've now got another spare 7, I think it is, in my spare parts box for it. When you do make an upgrade or a modification to it and you remove parts off it, like screws, nuts, bolts, etc., throw them in your spare parts box as well. You never know when you might need them later on. The other upgrade I would strongly advise you do, this front panel just kicks it out a bit, combined with the ADVi3 firmware by Sebastian and Driven. That firmware is very easy to use. If you run a BL Touch like I am, which is another modification I've done, it is so easy to set it up and adjust it compared to, say, Marlin vanilla stock setup. So I strongly recommend that one. It does make life so much easier. If you're doing a lot of printing with the standard bed, this is the standard surface. It's like a PIE type surface. It does wear and it can fail, and nothing worse than having one fail and leaving a hole in there when you're trying to pull the print off and it pulls a piece out. So I would get spares of these if you're using them. I had so many of these fail though over the years, and I did a lot of printing. I've printed out an R2D2 and an in-move robot on this. So I've actually gone to the Ultra base by Anycubic. It's actually a glass base with some slight porous top, If you're printing at 65 degrees C on the bed, all you have to do is clean it with isopropyl alcohol before you start, and it will stick without any hassle at all. When it gets down to about 30 degrees C on its cool down cycle, the parts will just fall off. No need to use tools. The other thing I would suggest is getting a good scraper. I've been using this one for years. I've been having trouble getting some parts off the other beds prior, and I managed to damage the back end of it. But yeah, I can't recommend enough to get a decent scraper with a good sharp edge to get under. Be careful with these. When they've got a good sharp edge and you're applying a lot of force, if you slip and your hand is in the way, you will get cut. I tend to try and only push away from myself, so if I do slip, I don't get cut. A pair of tweezers is always handy to have nearby when it first starts to heat up. As the head gets up to temperature, it's always going to extrude a little bit. It's only dripping out, it's not under control, and you'll want to get rid of that before you start your print, because you don't want it dragging that into the base of your print. Set of flush cutters are always handy for cutting off bits and pieces of plastic at the end of a print, whether that be support material or if you've had some string. With the ultra base from any cubic, holding it down, most people were using clips similar to these. While these work, they do get hit by the printer quite a bit. I actually found these were a very good add-on. These are neodymium magnets, and that's just a plastic clip. The idea is the bottom one is actually secured to the heater base, and this just sits on with magnets. So getting this off is actually very easy. I haven't put the new PI in. In fact, I haven't even finished cleaning that properly. I haven't had to put one on, a new plate on, since I've started going to this. This is my first ultra base from Anycubic, and I've had it on there nearly a year. As far as upgrades to the rest of it goes, I added the BL Touch. After watching a video from Teaching Tech, and I'll put a link in the description for that, I installed that. It's also when I installed the firmware for the ADVi3++. Back then it was version 3 point something, and it did have a massive improvement. However, in the early stages I was having a lot of issues with it lifting up on the right hand side. That turned out to be this bit of framework was twisted slightly, and that was causing the head to move down. Now, while you could level it with the adjustment screws to take that out of it, because it's a twist, it was bringing the BL Touch at the front down closer, and that would result in it thinking the bed was higher, and so it would lift it up on the software or firmware and start printing too high. Now that I've found and fixed that problem, it prints perfect every time. The other upgrade I made to this has been this ducting that allowed me to move the part cooling fan from the front to the back and put the BL Touch at the front. Another upgrade I've made to this is I've now got the Flexion extruder installed on this. I found that while it doesn't make any improvement on printing PLA, it is actually very good when you're printing flexible materials. I can print flexible materials like TPE and TPU at almost the same speed as I print PLA. Without that upgrade, you're greatly reduced in the print speed you can achieve with those flexible materials. Another upgrade that I've done is adding the Z braces. Now originally I had Z braces on the front. I can't remember where I found those files on Thingiverse. They were on Thingiverse, but then later on I found the ones for the back and I moved them to the back. Having the Z bracing at the front didn't work for me because it kept getting in the way. Having it at the back, they do what they were designed to do and they stay out of the way. The Z bracing theory is it stops the top potentially vibrating, making it more rigid, and helps take out some of the layer lines that you get. I don't know that it makes a lot of difference, but I've got them on there. I'm not taking them off. The other thing I do a lot with this is use the Raspberry Pi. It's running Octoprint, is connected to the printer. I run it pretty much all the time. It has a Raspberry Pi camera on there, and I will either time-lapse capture the video of the prints as they're printing, and or use Octolapse plugin and have it actually move the bed all the way out and the head over to the left-hand corner to take a photo and then continue. It comes up with some very nice photos. The downside is it tends to add stringing as it moves over and comes back, and I've got video showing that as well. Another cheap thing you can do is print off a couple of Z height bars. It is possible and easy enough to actually screw or skew the height of the Z between left and right. This helps you very quickly and very easily get it back into being parallel. If you're running into any sort of level issues or bed adhesion issues, check that one first, check your fan second. I'll see if I can find the link in Thingiverse for these and put them in the description as well. So that's mods and upgrades. This is a case for the Raspberry Pi. I'll put a link in that in the description as well. I've also got a video of fitting that one on there and also fitting the Z braces at the back, so I'll link to that as well. Okay, so let's move around to the back of the printer where all the real work is. Okay, so one of the things we need to do periodically is basically just cleaning. I live in a dusty environment, you know, country Victoria. We haven't had a lot of rain this year, so we do get a lot of dust come through. As a result, dust will settle on your rails and they're going to cause you issues. So my suggestion is get a bit of clean paper towel, clean them up, then with another bit of clean paper towel, add some lubricant, either sewing machine oil or a Teflon coating type lubricant, and wipe over your bars. Your bars should be kept clean as much as possible. Tensioning on these is done automatically by this little spring, but just check the state of that spring. If it's folding up, it means that your belt's stretching. Now, while it won't affect an individual print, if it's starting to stretch, it's a very good indication it's getting ready to break. So I would strongly suggest getting another belt in if you see that spring starting to compress up. The amount of plastic and rubbish that can build up on the top deck of your printer here is unbelievable, particularly if you're doing a lot of printing, along with dust. So give that a good clean down as well, and don't forget to clean your Y-axis bar rails as well. Depending on how often you print and your environment, look, I'd say every 1 to 3 months go over and give them a good clean and check all your belts and make sure they're okay, make sure they're not frayed. And that's all you really need to worry about. Clean your bed every start of every print, clean your rails, even check and lubricate your Z screws from time to time. And don't forget to clean and lubricate these rails at the same time. Okay, so that's it for this printer. I have got the other printer. I haven't had it as long, but let's move over and have a look at it. Okay, so this is my Creality CR10S5. This is a large scale printer, 500 by 500. The other printer is 200 by 200 by 180. To be quite honest, the other printer is cheaper to run. It uses less power than what this one does, but it's limited on its print size. If you're only printing something up to 100 or 150 mil in size, you do it on the Cocoon Create. But if you're printing something that's over 200 in any dimension, then you would go for this one. Again, this is a glass base. This is the one that came with it. The first major upgrade I made to this printer was I added the BL Touch. The adjustment screws on the bottom are way in underneath, loose as all hell, hard to get at when you're trying to level it, particularly the back ones, so the BL Touch makes a world of difference in that case. This one is a Bowden feed. The extruder is located at the back here. Unfortunately, the cable and the Bowden tube can drag down on the glass, which is not real good when you're starting your printer. You get your print starting to run and then you have the cable drag over and it can actually drag it off the bed and ruin your print. So to overcome this, I found, located on Thingiverse, and I'll put a link in the description, this little clip. And that little clip, very simple, I'll just pull it off, holds one of these little key chain belt clip things. It's just a stretchy thing and it just holds the cable and Bowden tube up. I also wrapped a little bit of spiral wrap around to keep the Bowden tube and the power cable together, run them through the loop, and that keeps them off the table. Again, before any print, give it a clean. I haven't done too many prints with this printer, but this is your track. This is a V-slot printer, so this is your track where your pulleys run. Check and make sure they're clean. I'd do that almost the start of every batch of print you do, and depending on how big your batch is, even during the print run. You've got both top and bottom. Check your belt tension. There is no auto tensioner on this one, so you do need to manually check it, and you'll need to manually check it more often than you do with, say, this Cocoon Create that has the auto tensioner. You've got a belt down here for the Y-axis. Again, you want to check the tension on that and make sure it's okay. The pulleys, the V-slot pulleys for the Y-axis are on the side here. Again, check and make sure they're nice and clean, and check that your pulleys are seated properly in the V-slots. These things have an offset nut. As you turn that nut, it will adjust the pulley in or out from that. You want it to be firm. You don't want it to be too tight. Just firm is good, and check the ones on your bed at the same time. I found these little indicators on Thingiverse. I've printed them out, I've installed them. I'll put a link in the description for it. I've still got to get the tape with the measurements on to put on both sides to basically do the same thing as what this does on the Cocoon Create, just to let me see that they are level, because there is a screw on the back of both sides to level the bed out. This printer had a very small heater on it compared to the size of the bed. In fact, the heater was only about that wide, by that long. So it didn't even cover the whole of the bed, just in the middle, and it was only around 200 watts. So it was very lacking on power. It was taking 22 minutes for this to get up to 65 degrees C for printing. That was problematic. Here's my points. I've since upgraded. I've put a silica heater on the bottom. It's a 1300 watt heater. Yes, it's mains powered. I found that has made a dramatic difference to the heat speed. It now heats up in under 2 minutes. I'll just take this camera off and hold it for a moment, so bear with me. There's my control box for the heater. I've actually passed the thermistor wires through and back to the printer control box. That's it there. So the printer control box still controls the heat and monitors the thermistor. So I still get heat failures. We'll shut the printer down. Well, that's not good. I'll have to move that back a bit. But yeah, it dramatically improved things. The next upgrade I'm planning for this is a drag chain on this, because it can catch. I have that print in progress, and also a drag chain for these cables. I may have to extend those cables yet. When I do that, there'll be a video for that as well. So I think that about covers most of the basics on that. When you're leveling the beds, there's a couple of schools of thought on leveling beds. The major one is get your bed up to temperature. Beds will warp when they heat up, and they can warp differently at different temperatures and by different amounts. So pick the temperature you're going to be running at and heat to that temperature. Now this is where people have different schools of thought. I prescribe to the theory of heating your hot end up as well to print temperature. Usually 190 to 200 degrees C, depending on the material you're using. That's for a PLA, of course. The theory is, if you have a bit of plastic protruding out from under your nozzle, and it will happen at the end of each of your prints, particularly if you're not present for it. See if I can get it under. See that properly, but there's a little bit of filament hanging out the end there. That's a result of what extruded out or dribbled out at the end of the last print. On this one, it's harder for me to get a view of it. This one looks to be clear, but there could always be a small amount of plastic on the bottom of down here. Now the problem is, if there is a small nub of plastic left after the end of the last print, and not everyone's around when that happens, then it's going to upset your leveling. And if you upset your leveling, then your first print might not necessarily work the way you expect. So I recommend heating your bed up to temperature before you start leveling your bed. If you're using a BL Touch, as I am on both of these machines, the only one that you need to really worry about with heating up the nozzle and heating up the bed is your Z offset. The Z offset is the difference in height between the trigger point on the BL Touch and the tip of the nozzle. On the ADV i3 Plus firmware for the Cocoon Create, it's very easy to set that, exceedingly easy to set that compared to setting it on this machine. It took me a few goes to get it on this one because it's not as intuitive or easy to set. Once it is set, however, you can actually use the BL Touch to check the level of your bed. So I'm going to actually show an example of that using the Cocoon Create because it's so much easier. In this case, I'm actually going to do an auto bed level with it cold. I'm not going to save the results. So in this case, we'll go to leveling and we're going to go to automatic. The first thing it does is home. The vanilla Marlin firmware, you actually have to manually home it first. So with the Cocoon Create, the first thing it does is finds its 0 for Z-axis, and then it starts running through measuring the height of each point. By default, this one does 9 probe points. And the thing I like the most, at the end of the leveling process, I'm just going to move in closer so you can see this. You can see the values that it got on each corner. So you can see over time it does drift. This has drifted compared to what it's been, and you can see that it's actually a little bit on the it's showing me a little bit high on the right hand side. But with that, you can actually adjust your thumb screws, your bed leveling thumb screws, and having the indications on here allow you to actually do it more easily because we've got these numbers. So we can now adjust that, then redo the leveling, and you can see how much you've corrected it. Very, very easily. If you haven't got the BL Touch, then you're going to have to adjust the screws and use your feeler gauge. You can use a sheet of 80 GSM paper. That will work as your leveling guide. On the Cocoon Create Touch, it actually recommends a height of 0.1 millimeters, and so I use the 0.1 millimeter feeler gauge, and I use that for setting my Z height as well. So that's all there is to it, really. If you like these videos, don't forget to click on like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you're notified when other videos come out. It's a form of support that helps the channel a great deal and costs you absolutely nothing. If you'd like to support the channel further, I do have a Patreon account, and you can join my VIP patrons Go Lucky and Lorenz Berger, and my Builder level patrons El Morales 45 and White Wolf in supporting the channel. All my patrons get these videos at least a week early compared to YouTube. I also have a Discord server, so if you would like to join the community, follow the link in the description, and if you've got any questions, either ask in the description or in the comments, or post in Discord, and I'll do my best to answer those questions when I can. If you post in Discord, others may also have the answers for you. And we'll see you in the next video.